I'm Sarah Tack, a journalist and lawyer who has spent years covering bizarre criminal cases and sensational trials. In my quest to track down the culprits, I want to tell the story of not only the perpetrators, but also the people who are often forgotten in court, the people who have to live with the tragic consequences of their loved ones being murdered. I broke down and cried when I first heard this story. I couldn't even comprehend what was happening at first. Why did Annelie have to endure such a terrible thing? And why do we, her family, have to live in this endless pain? We miss you so much, Annelie. We are always here, waiting for you to come back. Please, if anyone has any information about my daughter, please come forward. She was last seen wearing a white dress with a bouquet of flowers in her hands. I long to see my daughter in that pure white, holding the flowers in her hands. I am also a mother, a wife, a friend, and I know how terrible it is when a loved one suddenly disappears. It is not just a vague worry, it can become a reality at any moment. But what if it is no longer a fear, but a cruel reality? How can family members go on living when their loved one is taken away by a brutal crime? This is the story of Annelie Marie Riss. Everyone calls her Annelie. The 17-year-old is in her final year of high school and lives in the state of Saxony, between the cities of Dresden and Meissen. Annelie's father is a successful businessman, and that is what led to the tragedy. Can you tell me what kind of person Annelie is? She is very cheerful, full of life. Annelie is always happy with her friends, loves school, and has an incredible passion for learning with a balanced, curious personality. She is truly a little ray of sunshine. Annelie is always exploring the world and is ready to embark on her first journey of freedom. She has a gift for languages and has said that she wants to spend a year abroad, which I am sure she will do. Her enthusiasm and curiosity are her most outstanding qualities. It was the best time of her life, when Annelie would play the piano and enjoy the peaceful moments. She didn't like to be watched while she played, but the music would still be playing softly from the next room. Those moments were precious. I had known Annelie since kindergarten, and there was hardly a day that went by without us talking. Annelie was always smiling, and she spread inspiration, charm and joy wherever she went. She loved her daily bike rides with her dog, Paula. I was gardening that day, and left the phone on the patio table. When I heard the ringing, I turned around and saw it was from Annelie, but it wasn't her. It was a man, speaking broken German, saying they had kidnapped Annelie. At first I thought it was a joke, because of the way he spoke, but after a few sentences, I realized it was serious. Without hesitation, we immediately called the police. Just before 8 p.m., the first call came to the Riss family. The kidnapper deliberately used a strange accent to demand a ransom of 1.2 million euros. If we did not pay, we were threatened that our daughter would be taken away. I immediately ran to my wife, completely stunned, explained everything and asked her to call the police immediately. I got in the car and drove in the direction where we thought Annelie might be. On the way, I kept calling Annelie back. And at a climactic moment, the kidnapper himself picked up the phone again. I heard Annelie screaming in the car, and I immediately started looking for every bicycle on the road, hoping to see Paula, the dog Annelie often took for walks. I found the bicycle and a moment later found Paula at the exact spot where the kidnapping had taken place. There, Annelie had been restrained. The kidnapper had thrown the bicycle into the field and tied up the dog. I learned that Annelie had been kidnapped from a phone call from my mother. At that time, we were just getting ready. I got a call saying Annelie had been kidnapped, and I asked if I could come right away. I said, yes, I will. The first thing we did was try to figure out what to do next. Should we call someone? Was it a joke? At first, we tried to convince ourselves that it wasn't serious, and then we started calling friends and family. That night, I was at the theater with my parents. During a break, I checked my phone and saw a series of missed calls from Annelie's mother. I called back immediately, and she tearfully informed me that Annelie had been kidnapped, and asked if I knew where she was or who she was with. I was stunned, and burst into tears. They said her daughter was now in the Czech Republic and would never return. Have everything ready by noon tomorrow. I'll call you back. Cold and scary. See, the child was in the hands of criminals who were only after money. I had to act, but at the same time I had to wait. The feeling in that situation is indescribable. You don't know what condition your child is in, and your mind immediately goes to the worst-case scenarios. It's unimaginable pain. I've heard of similar stories where we later supported the families of the victims. When a tragedy happens, life as it was before is over. It was like that back then. Every minute felt like a lifetime when you were stuck waiting, not knowing when the next call would come. It's hard for anyone who hasn't experienced it to imagine the utter helplessness. We just hoped that our daughter would somehow escape the clutches of these monsters. The worry for Annelie Marie was endless, and the pain was indescribable. The feeling of helplessness was becoming more and more evident, but there was still a glimmer of hope because we were surrounded by experienced professionals who were accompanying the family. We did not sleep a wink that night, ready to meet any demands. However, I still hoped that everything would end well. The last contact with the kidnappers was on Friday morning, and at that time we still held out hope. The police were still trying to reach them. But none of them were successful. It was an incredibly difficult time for Annelie's parents. Yesterday, they decided to cooperate publicly with the police. In an emotional letter, they appealed to the kidnappers, the community and Annelie herself. Annelie, we miss you, and we are with you. If anyone has information that will help find our daughter, please come forward. The kidnappers should know that we are ready to do whatever it takes to get her back safely, as soon as possible. Can you please get back in touch? Background music. What are you hiding? That morning, the forensics department made a major breakthrough when a DNA sample collected at the scene matched a profile in the police database. The results showed that it was a local man with a criminal record for multiple crimes, including fraud, arson, and sexual offenses. Background music. The police also recorded calls between the kidnappers and the victim's family. What was their reaction? They once said the child was in the Czech Republic, and another time in Bohemia. We had experts analyze these recordings, and they pointed out that the speaker had a typical southern German accent, not Czech or Polish as the police had suspected. At one point, the investigators also thought that the victim might have actually been taken abroad. We had to consider all possibilities. That's one of the key tasks, to determine where the victim is now, whether it's possible to pinpoint her location. However, the calls are coming from around Dresden, so we're pretty sure she's still here, even if it's somewhere unknown. Something is going on in the Free State of Saxony. Also, people in rural areas are very observant. They notice where someone parks their car, who visits their neighbors. It's almost instinctive in the countryside. A resident pointed out that silver cars had been driving regularly towards the BMW plant in the past. We tracked them down and identified the owner as Marcus B., and traced his phone number. From there, we tracked down his contact person, suspect K. On Monday night, the police raided their home, searched every corner, but did not find Annelie. However, investigators believe that the chain of evidence, from the phone call, the license plate, the crime scene, to Marcus B.'s criminal record, all lead to a clear connection. It is likely that these men kidnapped Annelie. Investigators are wasting no time. DNA traces on Annelie's bicycle led them to Bavaria, where a 39-year-old man was arrested yesterday. Just hours earlier, another suspect had been arrested in Dresden. The motive for the murders may have been greed. One of the suspects was an unemployed chef, while the other was a scrap metal collector. Marcus B. Who was this man? He lived with the desire to be admired. Ever since he was an adult, he has been involved in scams to buy things he cannot afford. Maintaining his image was so important to him that he hid his true self from his wife for years. Marcus B. even made up a story that his father was a successful businessman who would leave him more than €1 million. But it was all an elaborate lie. During the interrogation, Marcus B. barely spoke. After his arrest, another defendant, Norbert K., admitted to knowing B. but completely denied any involvement in the kidnapping of Annelie Marieris. However, during the interrogation that same day, when he went out for a smoke, He took a long time to answer when Investigator P asked him, "Is Annelie alive?" And finally, he blurted out, "It was my idea." Norbert K. said that he and Marcus B. had kidnapped Annelie on a country road on a Thursday evening and taken her to a farm. But what he said next shocked the entire investigation team. Annelie had been dead since Friday. That evening, the worst and most heartbreaking thing happened. Annelie was gone. The police found her body near an abandoned farm in the Meissen district. When did the bad news reach me? For tactical reasons, I cannot say. We were almost prepared for the news, but to be honest, no one is ever ready for it. You never think about it until it happens. Until the terrible moment when we learned that Annelie was dead, we had always held out hope that there was a way out. We had thought realistically, if they had the money, we could save our child. But the truth is, we had never really thought about the worst, that everything might fail, that there would be no chance. When I heard that Annelie had been murdered, everything came crashing down. My first reaction was a feeling of utter disgust for the perpetrators, and my next thought was to protect my parents from the shock. They looked at each other, their faces filled with worry, and I was so stunned that I almost collapsed. When they said, "We are sorry to have to bring you this bad news," everything in my head started spinning. I felt like I was about to faint. I screamed, completely broken, my mind unable to accept the truth. We had thought we would spend a lifetime together, and my wife was petrified. Maybe I wasn't really crazy, but I screamed, constantly asking, "Why? Why does Annelie have to endure this? Why do we have to suffer like this?" I couldn't understand what was happening. Everything was too painful and hard to accept. The shock was so great that everything became blurry. My mother said that I didn't know whether to throw up or faint. I just cried and screamed. When the news of Annelie really stopped, we just hugged each other and cried. How can you describe such a situation in words? It felt like an explosion, like the world would never come tomorrow. I thought of her youth. We decided to put up white balloons for the memorial service. Each attendee could release one into the sky, as a way to say goodbye to her soul. I still remember the image in the church, Annelie in her white dress, everyone singing, "True Colors," a moment of gentle relief in the heartbreaking funeral. Everyone then walked out, each holding a small flower from a basket to leave a farewell message. Everything was quieted by the piano music, making the atmosphere even more quiet and sad. The image of the little girl in a white dress and a bouquet of flowers appeared clearly, and I said something that made everyone choke up. This is not how I imagined seeing her in a wedding dress and holding flowers. Music plays. I still have the black and silver outfit I wore that day. Music applause. It was a hot day. It was a moment of both remembrance and honor, a way to say thank you for Annelie's wonderful existence. When asked what that loss evoked in me, all I could say was a mixture of pain and love. On one hand, I wanted to remember the wonderful qualities of my sister. On the other hand, we had to face such a cruel crime. It was supposed to be the thing that brought us together, but instead it was a double-edged sword, sweet and bitter, sacred and haunting. That day woke us up, because the world outside continued on, while our loved ones were forever absent. It felt like being stuck in a snow globe, watching the world spin while we stood still. At first, I was surprised that I felt okay for the first month or two, despite the turmoil around me. But as life began to return to normal, the pain returned. The moments when I wanted to text or call Annelie, only to realize that she would never answer. That was when things really got hard and still felt like a dark dream. Families are left with the final straw. Victims of crime struggle to rebuild their lives. So what can help them move on? For surviving loved ones, the trauma is just as severe and lasting as the victims. They often find themselves trapped in thought loops. What if I had done something differently? Why couldn't I have stopped it? If only I had known to save her. These thoughts are repeated over and over again and can easily become draining. When someone you love is hurt, the pain is irreversible. But the family must try to regain some control, work through the shock together, and make the event part of their family history. Remembering the person who has died is not only healing, but also a way to find meaning in life, with respect for what has passed. A meaningful life has its own music. For us, this place is the melody that is most closely associated with the kidnapping and with Annelie. We don't want this to be just another roadside stop, but a space of remembrance. A place where people can pause and remember her. Because not everyone can easily overcome terrible memories, and as they say, we want to help people grow from their own pain. The fake grandparents, as they are known, have embarked on an emotional journey. Their daughter says they don't want Annelie to be forgotten. So they plan to set up a charity in her name to deal with the pain that has crippled the family. While it may sound grand, at the end of the day, they want to help prevent similar crimes and make the world a better place. We just want children in the area to have the opportunity to develop their talents, express themselves, and live in a safe environment. But for Annelie's parents, every day is like a recurring nightmare. Memories of their daughter resurface constantly, especially when the trial for their daughter's kidnapping and murder officially begins at the Dresden District Court, where they are attending as civil plaintiffs. Faced with the men who took their loved one, they listened as prosecutors charged Marcus B. and Norbert K. with murder and kidnapping for ransom. The court would shed light on what happened on the trail and in the abandoned barn in August 2015. We watched the trial closely, feeling tense and chilled as the defendants showed almost no emotion, not a frown, not an apology. It was a courageous and proactive decision for the victim's family to confront the perpetrator directly in court. Why was it so important to them? Because that moment, that look, and the opportunity to speak their mind about the perpetrator, all had special meaning. They knew that the judge could not say everything, so it was necessary to speak directly to the murderer, clearly, honestly, and without hiding their emotions. I said everything that was on my mind. And honestly, saying it made me feel better. Not because it would heal the pain, but because at least I didn't let it suffocate me in silence. For defendant Marcus B., his poor background was the reason he tried to create a false facade of luxury. By the summer of 2015, he was deeply in debt after signing a notarized contract to buy a house in the B area, a decision that made his financial situation irreparable. The debt amounted to €530,000, and the defendant knew that it was impossible to repay it by legal means. He was a typical example of a person who lived beyond his means and always tried to appear to be someone else. What made him so good at deception? Those who did business with him said that Marcus B. always appeared confident, spoke fluently, and was not afraid to forge documents or conceal the truth. He hid his true nature with a dignified demeanor, making it difficult for others to suspect him. Many of the people he fooled were completely unaware that they were being fooled, because he played the role so convincingly. This is the hallmark of skillful con artists. They know how to use confidence to reinforce their lies. And that is also why people like Marcus B. can play the role of nice guy so well. It is both incomprehensible and heartbreaking that a fake person can ruin the lives of so many people. It's hard to give a definitive answer, but I've worked with criminals who, after their initial plans went awry, chose to kill to cover up their actions. In such cases, the kidnapper knows full well that the victim is the biggest threat, the one who can talk, identify him, and expose him to the harshest punishment. Things quickly fell apart. The music started playing, and from the 18th of November 2015, Defendant B had lured Defendant K into the kidnapping scheme, promising him a share of the €400,000 loot. Deep in debt, K agreed to join in. But he was not the cold-blooded criminal that B was. Norbert K was a manipulative person, someone who only needed someone powerful enough to steer him down the wrong path. This is clearly the type of person who does not initiate the crime, but is easily manipulated by others. Such people tend to blame, avoid responsibility, and easily follow the lead of others. That is why they become effective tools for dangerous people like Marcus B. However, K is still an adult, fully aware of the wrongness of his actions, and therefore must take full responsibility. Defendant B hid behind a bush on the side of the road, suddenly rushed out and pulled Annelie off the bike, using a towel soaked in ether to knock her unconscious. But contrary to expectations, the anesthetic did not work. Annelie struggled and fought back violently, but B still restrained her with a zip tie and locked her in the trunk of the car. They took her to an abandoned cowshed, where she was tied to a chair. At about 10:40 p.m., B began to consider killing Annelie to avoid being identified, despite the blackmail plan. He turned away, took a piece of orange and black belt, wrapped it around her neck and squeezed until she stopped breathing. Annelie Marie Riss died of suffocation in a short time. The reason she was not saved was because the killer was afraid of being discovered. He had exposed himself, left traces, and if she had lived, the police would have been able to track him down from her statement. To avoid that risk, the perpetrator chose to end his life. Both defendants were convicted of murder in the kidnapping resulting in death. For what they had done, B was sentenced to life in prison, and the court determined that the degree of guilt was especially serious, meaning that Marcus B would almost certainly never be released. But Norbert K's case was different. Although convicted of murder, Norbert K was sentenced to only 6 months in prison. The court found that he did not directly carry out the act like B, but simply did not intervene. Annelie's father said that the sentence was too light. Norbert K had all night to speak up, to save my daughter, but he chose to remain silent. It was the choice of a man who knew what was happening, but still turned his back. Why did they share Annelie's story? While it is natural for people to forget their pain and move on, reliving these terrible memories seems counterintuitive. It hurts, it corrodes the soul, so what is the point? To say, it was worth it. To make others remember Annelie, so that the crime will not be repeated. To put the victim at the center of attention and thereby find ways to prevent future crimes. How do you get over such a tragedy? The wound never heals completely. It is a part of you, and you have 2 choices: let it destroy you or live with it. For your family, for society, and for yourself. My wife endured it all, but with deep wounds in her soul. Ron was a strong woman, and perhaps it was she who helped us survive these terrible losses. I have just heard of another mother who lost her child to murder. There are no words to describe the pain. It is the worst nightmare anyone would ever want to go through. This pain is so great, my dear child. No more little shoes to get stuck on the floor, no more messy desk, no more translator chirping when the family goes on vacation, no one to pick and choose each grain of rice snail. No more gentle fingers stroking your beautiful long hair, no more chirping when I need help fixing the computer. My sweet piano player, who will drink apple tea with me? The list goes on and on. We grow old, some become mothers, some get married. And on my wedding day, Annelie was absent. I thought of you a lot. The background music that day happened to play a piece you used to play on the piano. It felt like you were there with everyone. I really felt the strength in you, the resilience in you every time you stood by your parents, by your children, still moving forward, continuing to live and do meaningful things. But there will be times when you are so weak, sad, emotional that you can't be strong anymore, right? I understand. She drives to work every day. On that familiar route, she passes the cemetery, where Annelie's grave is visible. Every morning, it's a greeting to her. But there are days when sadness suddenly wells up, and she cries in the car. And she lets it happen, because it's okay. Keeping Annelie's memory alive, not letting it be drowned out by tragedy, is what we need to do. Family, those are close friends, and for her, that is extremely important. Because in court, people only talk about the motive of the perpetrator to evaluate the crime. But here, in this life, the people who are not in the spotlight, our family, our friends, are the ones who will live forever with the loss, with the consequences of the crime. They are the ones who need to be listened to and shared.